Well, the best part of this show is you, our viewers, and we love your input, whether it's questions, stories, ideas, comments, critical feedback. Bring it on, we can handle it. Well, the latter here, the comments, that spurred this next story. Now, COVID-19 is a term that many would like to put in the past and leave it there forever, but Dr. David Pate, formerly of St. Luke's, he ran the health system there, and he was also on the governor's COVID task force. Well, alongside Dr. Ted Epperly here in Boise, they're writing a book about the lessons that they learned about the pandemic and how to potentially handle a pandemic in the future. We originally reported this to you earlier this year. We told you the book would likely be out the summer of 2022. Well, that brings us to a question here. Irma asks, what is the status of the book about COVID-19 being written by Dr. David Pate and Dr. Ted Epperly? It's a great question, Irma. So we talked to Dr. Pate today about how the book is coming together and what readers can expect.
Well, we're very excited. Dr. Epperly and I are very pleased. The book is finished being written. We've been going through an editing process. I'm reading it through the actual typeset prints. That is how it will appear in the book. So we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule on that regard. Dr. Epperly and I were very much hoping that it would be out before the end of the year, especially in time for Christmas, because who wouldn't like a book about a pandemic? But it looks like Johns Hopkins University Press is saying the release date will be April 18th. We're hoping that gets moved up, but I know there's a lot of behind the scenes things that go on that, we don't understand, but it's been a very long process, but it's very gratifying. As I reread the book, I find that the points that we made are just as salient today as they were when we finished writing about a year ago.
And some of those points, I guess, we don't want to spoil the book. We want people to read it in depth, but I guess tease us a little bit. What are some of the points that readers will come away with?
Yeah, and this book is really written so you don't have to know anything about virology or immunology or epidemiology. On the other hand, it's also written with a lot of pearls for those who are in the field, because as we know, we made many mistakes. And so part of the book, the purpose is just to document what happened. And even though some of the lessons will seem pretty obvious at this point, they're all mistakes that we made. And they're things that we should have learned from years and decades and centuries ago. So we're getting it all documented and putting those lessons in place for the next one. But the other thing that this book does that no other book that I'm aware of, and I think I've read almost every COVID book there is, but what this really does is talk about, okay, what do we do different for the next pandemic, the next global threat? And what are some different approaches, and what is important to learn from this? For example, Joe, I've been very critical of school boards. So there is an entire chapter about how do you govern when it's high complexity and high risk, and what could a school board, and this could be applied to others as well, what would you do from the beginning to avoid getting to the point where when I was called in, teachers had just announced a sick out and parents were picketing? You don't want to get to that point. And so we lay out a whole plan of what you could do and how to manage the next pandemic, which will be different. And I don't think that our book is particularly controversial. That's not to say that every expert will agree with everything that we say, but they're ideas, they're proposals, and they're things that, like you said, I hope we could have a rational discussion about. And out of the 117 recommendations, if we could just agree that half of them make sense and we ought to do that, we'll be in better shape for next time.
Dr. Pate says that the book is ready for pre-order by the publisher, Johns Hopkins University. It's available on their website. He tells us the official release date right now, April 18th, 2023.